Hi, and welcome to our video of a visit to Petworth House and Park in West Sussex. Petworth House is around 50 miles southwestish of London. Our journey starts with a 10-minute uphill walk through the pleasure garden until we reach the house. We spend the majority of our time in the house admiring the artwork, but this being a sunny English day, we then take a short walk around the upper pond before returning to the car park. Anyway, let's get strolling. And it's only a short distance in that walk to Petworth House. You get the first landmark, the Ionic Rotunda. Then we pass the rather quaint little shepherd's hut. The whole of the Petworth estate is managed by the National Trust, and I'll pop a link in the description below so you can find more information and download maps of the grounds in the house. As you walk along, you'll come across the remains of a giant redwood planted in 1869. However, rot was discovered, so it had to be felled. Now we're starting to get an idea of how grand Petworth House and Park are. As I mentioned, we're walking through the pleasure garden, and one thing that's clear is that none of the planting here or in the whole of the estate is there by accident. We'll discover more as we wander. Then we come across a rather interesting little building with its Doric columns. It's the old fire engine shed, and I guess it's an essential for when you look at what we're going to see in the house. Rudimental now, but state of the art when it was employed. As you've probably guessed, we're just a stone's throw away from the house now. Here you'll find the ticket office, the store, the cafe, and the second-hand bookshop. But we're going to step straight into the oak hallway, and here you'll find the Battle of Waterloo by George Jones on the wall. And the Oak Hall was the original tourist entrance to Petworth House, and it's from here we head on into the Somerset room. And here the works of art on the wall grab your attention. From the youngest children of Charles I above the fireplace, to the Adoration of the Magi by Hieronymus Bush. This room was clearly designed to impress a visitor, and we absolutely are. But this is just the tip of the iceberg. Not only was this room a gallery, but it also served as a room to warm up food for the square dining room that we're going to step into next. Although originally this was the bigger servants' quarters. I guess for a house that's been around since the 17th century, things have changed. This room contains a lot of family portraits, but there's also a couple of pictures of note. One is the portrait of Henry Percy, the 9th Earl of Northumberland, painted by Anthony van Dyck. An interesting character, and we'll discover more of him later. The other is Macbeth and the Witches by Sir Joshua Reynolds. The National Trust room guides will give you so much more information on the artwork. This piece is unfinished and probably in need of a touch of restoration too. The other thing that caught my attention was the beautiful gilded mirrors. We're now about to step into our next room, which is the Marble Hall. And until the 1870s, this would have been the main entrance to the house. Now in the centre is a large diorama depicting the history of the estate. In the left-hand corner you can make out the now redundant mahogany organ, and in the centre an unknown cardinal by Titian. We now step into the beauty room, so named after the Petworth Beauties, a series of female portraits that line the room. This now leads us on to the grand staircase, and this is another wow moment. Created by the 6th Duke of Somerset after the original room was devastated by fire in 1714. The walls were painted in 1720 by Louis Laguerre to tell the story of Prometheus and Pandora. The bronze statue is an early 19th century copy of Cilnius nursing the infant Bacchus, the Roman god of agriculture, fertility, and most importantly wine. As you can see, the decor is heavily influenced by the classics. Now, as we go to climb the grand staircase, it's time for me to say, if you're enjoying this, then please give us a like. It really helps. And if you enjoy our style of content, then why not subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss any more of our travels. We do like a bit of history and culture. And at the end, I'll put up the playlist with more of our visits to National Trust properties. One thing I do need to point out, there are some private rooms at Petworth House that are occupied by Lord and Lady Egremont, so you need to check the National Trust website to see when they're open. However, there's no photography or video allowed. We'll take one final look at the fantastic ceiling of the grand staircase before we head to our next room, which is the little dining room. In the corner is the statue of the Emperor Nero as a boy, said to be nearly 2,000 years old. The room also contains another Van Dyck, a portrait of Lady Percy, Countess of Carlisle. It's now time to step into the next room, the ever so impressive carved room. Originally it was half this size, but in the 1700s, the third Earl decided to expand it. This room has a Tudor feel to it, but that may be due to the portrait of Henry VIII above the fireplace. Our next room is the Red Room, and here we find a couple of Turners, including one of Margate in Kent. Is that where the Turner Gallery is now? And if you think things are impressive so far, we're going to step into the North Gallery. Okay, now buckle up. We have a few more works by the likes of Reynolds, Blake and Gainsborough, as well as a few more Turners for good measure. That's not to mention the sculptures and the Molyneux globe, the first English terrestrial globe and only surviving first edition from the 16th century. How different the world looked then. It's worth noting the National Trust carries out its conservation work over the winter months, so you may find some rooms or some objects are removed for the necessary restoration. You'll find more details on their website. And here's another Turner, ships bearing up for anchorage. Depending on your level of interest, you can find yourself here for literally hours. I said there were a couple of paintings by Turner in the North Gallery. Actually, there's 13. So a quick question for you. Have you been to Petworth House? Are you thinking about going to Petworth House? Or would you like to go to Petworth House? I'd love to hear from you, so drop us a note in the comments below, please. And another Turner. Hulks on the Tamar. And another couple. Okay, that's it, I promise. We're now going to move on to our next room, the chapel. And the history of this dates back to the 1300s, although the original medieval chapel was modified in the 1600s by the 6th Duke of Somerset, and it's said to be one of the most complete Baroque chapels in England. I have to say it's a really interesting place with plenty of detail. This is the last room we'll look at Petworth before we step outside and walk up to the Titian gate that leads to the deer park. It's from here you get the full scale of the house, which is nearly 100 metres long, or 322 foot in old money. In the centre of the building is the marble hall we visited earlier, the original grand entrance. And the view we see before us is the work of the renowned 18th century celebrity landscape architect Lancelot Capability Brown, designed to give wonderful views from the house and to the house. The upper ponds were created from existing features within the landscape. In fact, Capability Brown used a lot of the existing landscape in creating the deer park, including an oak tree that is said to have survived since before the Norman invasion of 1066. The deer park is 700 acres and dog friendly, so you can enjoy a decent walk around the grounds. We're just going to stick to the upper pond. The landscape-inspired Turner, that's no real surprise. He was a friend of the family and painted numerous scenes whilst here. In fact, you can catch one in the house. It features boats on the lake with the house in the background. As you can see, there's a lot of geese, but as I mentioned, this is a deer park, and there are between 700 to 800 fallow deer roaming around. However, this being a hot summer's day, I think we glimpsed some taking shelter under the trees higher up in the park. We decided to leave those alone. As you wander around the grounds, you're greeted with some wonderful views in what seems to be a totally natural setting. I guess this was the skill of Capability Brown. If the landscape and grounds of the National Trust properties are a draw, we have a wonderful book on our shelves called The Gardens of the National Trust by Stephen Lacey. That details hundreds of sites. It's well worth a look. I'll pop an Amazon link in the corner if you're interested, and for clarity, if you purchase it via that link from the UK, we'll earn a small commission. We were lucky enough to visit on a hot summer's day in early July. However, I think it would look wonderful at any time of the year. Hopefully the grass would be vibrant green in spring and the foliage would look lovely in autumn. In fact, I think I'm going to be tempted back. I need another visit to fully appreciate the house and its artworks. We're now going to make our way back via the pleasure gardens and check out that Ionic Rotunda. Once again, these neoclassical monuments feature, as they do at Stourhead in Wiltshire, to create the impression of grandeur. You can check out our visit to Stourhead in the playlist at the end. I enjoyed stepping into the rotunda and taking in the views of the gardens and the landscape beyond. Maybe we'll find a nice lunch in Petworth. Okay, we did. As I can see the car park, I think it's now time to say thanks so much for watching. I really hope you like what we put together. Until next time, stay safe, stay well, and happy travels.